All right. Well, folks, good evening and welcome to Eagle Harbor Book Company. I am everybody tonight. And I am the parent of an errant teenager. My little dog, Sergio, now that he's 7 years old, has decided that he's going to be a rebel, and he's just run off down the street. Somebody found him, and they're bringing him back. It's like, what do you mean you have my dog? What are you talking about? But tonight we have with us our featured author, Kathleen. And how do you pronounce the last name? I've known you for years and I never get it wrong.
Alcalá.
Alcala. She comes with a history replete with accolades. She's written 6 books of fiction. Somebody's got it. Have a seat. She has written 6 books of fiction and nonfiction that explore the rich and diverse history and culture of the Pacific Northwest, Mexico, and the Southwestern United States. Her books have won many awards and honors, including the Western States Book Award, the Governor's Writer Award, and the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association Award. She's also a member of the Apocryphal Nation and a proud island treasure in the arts on Bainbridge Island. Of her writing style, she is said to be in the league with Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Jorge Borges. The book for which we're here tonight is the third in a trilogy, that Treasures in Heaven, which is a stunning novel set in the turn-of-century Mexico City. It follows a young woman who flees scandal in a provincial village. She undergoes a profound transformation, becoming an active participant in a movement that foreshadows the Mexican Revolution. The novel explores themes of social change, women's rights, love, and the search for spiritual and material treasures in a corrupt and evolving society. Strangely relevant to today's times. She's joined in conversation tonight with poet, Bainbridge Island resident, and until recently Eagle Harbor Book Company's own bookseller, Erin Malone. She's one of my favorite people. And if you love our poetry selection, you can thank her. Erin's work has appeared in film, Field, New Ohio Review, Salamander, Cimarron, and a host of other publications, and her work has generated a lengthy list of accolades. Her most recent work, Site of Disappearance, was a finalist in the National Poetry Series. She's a recipient of the Coniston Prize from Radar Poetry and the Robert Creeley Memorial Prize from Marsh Hawk Press. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Washington, and among other things. Her most recent work is Site of Disappearance, which was a very personal collection of poetry based upon the loss of her brother at an early age, at a time when other young men were found lost in her community growing up. So it'll be an interesting conversation between the two. These two have known each other for a while, and I've listened in on conversations in the past. Tonight we get to listen in on a conversation without guilt. So tonight I give you Kathleen Alcalá and Erin Malone.
Hi. So Jim's right, we've known each other for about 25 years.
Since you worked in the English department front office.
Has it been that long?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's like 30 or so.
That's about right.
I thought that the way this is going to work is I'll talk for a few minutes, read a few poems, and then I'm going to ask Kathleen some questions, and then she'll read a little bit, right?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sound good? Okay.
And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. So I have been thinking a lot about, recently, about transformation and power. And transformation, of course, is at the heart of any good story. And it is, of course, this is a giant theme in Kathleen's book, so this is kind of perfect.
A core idea.
A core idea, yes. And I have noticed that, so I have 2 books of poems, and then I'm just starting work on a new one. And the first 2, I feel like the transformations sort of came at the end of the book. And And with this third, I feel like I'm starting inside of the middle place. Like I am in the act of transformation. And we can talk a little bit about why, but it does have to do with power and its evolution and what it is like to be a woman in this society. And I feel like we come into our power as women as we grow older, if we're lucky, maybe.
And we can wear really flashing things because we want to.
Because we want to. So I think maybe I'll just start reading a couple. So I have one that I'm going to read from my first book, and it does occur near the end. So in this book, this is about very early motherhood, when of course transformation is all there is. You thought you knew who you were, and you thought you knew what you were expecting, and you were wrong. So this is called Fable. I make a list of wishes, then cross them out. Listen instead to mice transcribing numbers in the wall by my head as I try to sleep under a grave skylight, under trees. The frogs hold forth their deep belief. Crickets treble. This is followed by a short assembly of silence. Stranded, my nightgown covered in vines, my dreams a disturbance with legs. It's taken me this long to become human. And again, that happens at the end of that book. Site of disappearance. These two are also about transformation. In the stories, we are all transformed. And there are a lot of fairy tales woven into this book, which has a lot to do with my childhood. And so this is the very last poem in the book. In the stories, we are all transformed. Out of the forest and down to Maine, a bear wanders headlong in the fog, past small houses wearing the blue of their windows. The bear can't see and is cold until mother and daughter let their yarn run onto the floorboards and answer the door. Ice clings to his fur, so they bring him to the fire. His great paws have trouble managing the china cup of broth, and his voice slides, sometimes honey, sometimes gravel. His words are not the words of a bear, yet they aren't afraid. His wet fur separating into spears in the firelight. In real life, he's a prince buried inside a bear. When the spell comes apart with a zipper, he steps out wearing his crown. And the beautiful bear suit like snow melt, its astonished jaws catching softly at his shine shoes. I pick it up. I put it on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a little bit, that's the ending poem of that book, and I do feel like it is a bridge to what is coming next with that. I put it on, so I'm taking It Matters into my own hands a little bit more. And this one is called If the World is Always Beginning. Inside the great body, lamps shine and sway, pin-tucked, the heat pleated, quilted, newspaper a whisper folding back onto itself. I not yet, myself. Bundled, mittened, and sent this way, fox fur, rabbit skin, new flute, winter, sun awake, awake, frost burning off. Who is the white plume rising from these needles? And then I'm going to read you one more. And I do have more from the book, but I just wanted to do one, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about this. This one is kind of just beginning, so it doesn't have rage in it, which some of them do. Some of the forthcoming ones do. This is called Equinox with River Otter. Little holes, the hours punched into a snowfield. I come back to myself in the middle or older, surrounded by the northern woods. In a ring of evergreens, the lake frozen still. But where the light thins, there's work, an animal arriving from underneath. Rolling and muscled like music, it will crack the ice like a star. My life adjusted without me knowing. And you who waited too, do you say the lake has broken or that the lake is opening? So,
Thank you.
Kathleen, thank you.
Those are great.
Thank you.
I've only read it.
Well, I'll tell you this one. So Kathleen, I'm just going to give like a little synopsis. Jim did a really great service to the book.
Who wrote that? Did you write that?
I don't know. He or
I
AI?
didn't write it.
I'm just kidding. Is he back there? Anyway, so this is a celebration of the reissue of Kathleen's Treasures in Heaven. Poverty, class boundaries, and crooked politicians have kept the women of 19th century Mexico City struggling and undereducated. Into their orbit comes Estela. I'm saying it right? Estela. Who with her infant son has fled her homeland. She becomes assistant to La Señorita, a uniquely powerful woman. Broken-hearted and with little to call her own, she uses her new role to teach and care for women less fortunate than she. So your dedication reads, for all our relations, by blood, by empathy, and by revolutionary spirit. And I want to just read a couple of quotes in my notebook here. So the first deals directly with the title, Treasures in Heaven, when Estela says about her daughter Maria, who's been estranged from her. She recognized the echo of words about women sacrificing themselves in this life for the diaphanous promise of treasures in the next. Earlier in the book, they, meaning the women, will have to change the order themselves. And then there's another quote that says, you are part of the repair of the world. So I would like you to talk specifically about, just for a moment, and as much as you want to, but about Estela's journey with that idea of power in mind. If that makes sense.
Yes. Estela leaves Saltillo, which is the city she's always lived in, and moves to Mexico City with her youngest child, her son, and wants to start over because her husband has disappeared. The authorities are chasing him because they think he started an Indian revolt, which he got caught up in and maybe inadvertently helped start a little bit, and moves to Mexico City and needs a way to support herself because she's left everything behind. And so she gets introduced to La Señorita, who is this woman with infinite means. She has a lot of money and a lot of ideas. And Estela, who's somewhat naive but has a lot of energy and a will to live and prosper, starts to run a school for this woman, a school for the unfortunate children of the street. And there are all these euphemisms on how you talk about people. And so at that time, in the 1870s, many people had migrated from the rural areas of Mexico to the big city, especially Mexico City, because as power and money became concentrated more and more into the hands of a few, all the peasants were displaced from the land and had to go into work. And so it began to foment the beginnings of revolution. So there are a lot of things going on at that time. And people were competing with each other for unskilled labor because there was no call for the labor that they knew how to do. President for Life Porfirio Diaz had successfully industrialized the country by bringing in the railroad and establishing relationships with the European countries. So Mexico looked to Europe for its models, not to the United States. But the lack of food and services left the country in turmoil. Our heroine, Estela de Carvajal, has left the city of her birth and finds work with La Senorita. Somebody asked me a while ago if she was based on someone. And the answer is, externally, yes, I knew a woman in Chihuahua, Mexico, who we all call La Senorita. Her name was La Senorita Naranjo. But she looked just like I envisioned La Senorita in the book to look. She was this tiny woman who dressed all in black all the time, and she was La Senorita. She was clearly unmarried, but really very charming, and not, I think, as full of ideas and schemes as La Senorita in the book.
How do you feel about I'm just really interested in Estela's sort of coming into her own.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was supposed to talk about.
No, you're fine, because you're giving us all this great.
I keep feeling like I need to provide context, but really, the things that she goes through are things that many of us go through. Estela is naive, and she's used to having a defined role in society. She didn't expect to have a husband who was going to run off and start a revolution in northern Mexico. And all of this material is based in actual events. The personal relationships are entirely made up, but all of these things happened at that time. So Estela, as you say, discovers that she can take some power in her own. She can learn how to have agency, as we say nowadays, and think about things. And she turns out to be very good at planning things and putting them together and finding the right person for the right position. So she's actually very successful on behalf of La Senorita to run the school. And she also, though not as successfully, takes more responsibility for the love affair she's been having off and on with Dr. Carranza, where she met in Chihuahua. All my books I've tried to write as pot boilers. I really wanted to write books that sold a lot of copies and a lot of people liked, and no matter what I write, no matter what, people say, oh, it's literary fiction. It's literary. It just has to be, like the kiss of death and just a bestseller.
Well, maybe, but I was very interested in the love affair and all of the relationships.
Actually, I had some other people say they really did like the love affair.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed writing those things. So she does that, and in the meantime, her little boy is growing up in the setting of all these women. And I thought about that a little bit, and when I was little, my family lived on a boys' ranch, Papa's boys' ranch, and I have 3 older sisters, and we all lived in this facility in rural California. And do you know where Devore Heights was? Do you remember that? It says maybe. And it was a very rural area at the time, and so we didn't know that people didn't necessarily have playmates who were juvenile delinquents. But it was fine. So Estela, I think, ends up becoming a better person, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she's always just been found self-centered. That was how she was raised.
Right, but then she shows such selflessness in what she gives to the women and by empowering them.
Yeah, she does.
They do have to do it themselves, but she sort of negotiates that, or she's the kinesis. she's the springboard for that transformation. Probably using the wrong word, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, and many of these women were very capable and they had to be in charge of their lives for decades. And so she discovers that there are all these networks and all of these ways of being that are completely outside of her sort of upper middle class life in rural Mexico. And like other cities, Mexico City has this, like New York, so either you're in or you're out. You're from Mexico City or you're not from Mexico City. You're from Paris or you're not from Paris, right? You're from New York or not. So she's not from Mexico City. And starts with that disadvantage. But she has the friendship and support of La Senorita, who's in charge of everybody.
And I do love the scene. Talk about, I mean, it's not really hot boiler, but where they get on the train and she gets on the train with La Senorita and they go to this sort of like...
That's what I'm reading.
Oh, good. Okay. So I won't say anything else about that. Just really, so you had a conversation with our former poet laureate, Claudia Castroluna, and she spoke with you about the embodiment of women in the book. So there are different types of women in the book. And can you talk about how they embodied certain ideas or maybe were symbolic of certain...
Well, I wasn't sure if that's what she meant, but she really kind of veered, kind of focused in on that notion of embodiment. And in some ways, I did want to add a real solidity to it as opposed to just being this ephemeral story that we were talking about long ago and far away. And so I wanted to have it grounded in those ideas of what women do and how women sleep and how women get up and get dressed and decide how to, make it through another day. So even Estela and her little La La Land has to become identified with these women who she never would have had anything to do with before. At the time, prostitution was legal in Mexico City because there were so many women who came from the countryside and didn't have any other way to make a living. And it was a way to make them register and also to give them health checks. Which is something that I think is struggled with even in this country today, this notion of women who are sex workers and how do you take care of them without legitimizing or taking advantage of their position in the world. And those aren't easy questions to answer. So she's dealing with that, and I think that the way I portrayed her in the book, she's not that standoffish. She pretty much goes with the flow because that's what she's told to do.
I also, just to push that metaphor a little bit about embodiment, this doesn't have to do with the women, but Beto, his embodiment is, I feel like if we want to talk about that, is very interesting because he has no legs, this character. And yet he is maybe the most spiritual person. Yes. So he is then a certain figure that stands maybe above what's going on around.
Yeah, and I remember seeing at least one person in Mexico like this who has the stumps of their legs strapped to a board and they propel themselves forward on their hands. And they are either beggars or not beggars, depending on their lives. But, so, yes, in terms of embodiment, he might be the other extreme.
Yeah, his character is beautifully written. I really love him. Okay, so I do have another question, but I think maybe we can talk about it if there's time at the end.
Okay.
So if you want to read.
Yes, well, I'm going to read this scene that Erin just referred to. La Senorita has come late at night to the school and said to Estela, "What are we doing here? These women will take care of themselves. Come with me tonight." She won't tell her where she's taking her. Estela looked about herself with astonishment. She was in a large, well-appointed room filled with tables. On each table stood a bottle of tequila or rum and a candle, and around each table was gathered a small group of women, talking, smoking, or playing cards. There was not one man in the room. The women were dressed in every manner imaginable, from traditional village dress to evening gowns to trousers with pistolas on each hip, boots on the table. Estela could barely keep herself from staring. As La Señorita had assured Estela, it did not matter that she was not wearing a hat. The women greeted La Señorita noisily, and she stepped forward into the crowd, waving and kissing and calling out names. A tall, striking woman stepped into the room from a doorway at the far end. She was dark and of exceptional beauty, dressed in a traditional white embroidered dress. She and La Señorita greeted each other with abrazos. "This," said La Señorita to Estela, "is our hostess, the incomparable Doña Cata." And this was a real person. Estela greeted her shyly, but recognition was beginning to dawn. She was now in the famous mansion that Don Porfirio had built for his mistress, La Doña, one of the most powerful women in Mexico. She ruled her village like a man and had acquired vast holdings of farmland and factories, much like La Señorita. When they were seated at a table, Estela leaned forward and asked, "How can these women be out at this hour without their husbands?" La Señorita threw back her head and laughed. Estela had never seen her like this. These women answer to no men," said La Señorita. "These are the mistresses of power. The men have their Congress, but the women have Doña Cata." La Señorita looked around the room. "This is the only reason there are health checks for the working women on the streets," she said, "and any schools at all that accept female students. Don't think for a minute that the men would have thought of these things on their own or approved of them. Still," she said, sighing, "there is so much left to do." Estela tried to look around discreetly. Some of the faces looked familiar, but most of them were unknown to her. This did not surprise her, since many of these women were never seen in public, at least not officially. Estela tried to imagine which women were with which prominent man in the government. La Señorita tried to help her out. "That's Doña Reina, who goes with Senator Gonzalo Bilbao," she whispered, "and that's the proprietress of one of the most expensive houses in the district, Doña Carmela." The men would take their wives, if any women at all, to official functions, including those held by La Señorita to raise money for the school. Still, as La Señorita introduced Estela to them, a few said, "Oh yes," as though they knew who she was, and some even said, "the woman in gray," as though it were her title. She wondered if in their minds she was associated with Victor Alfonso. Estela could hear conversations about banking and transportation, about the best colleges in Europe, the best sea routes to get there, and who had just acquired a prize painting for her collection. The finest hand-rolled cigarettes were offered to each table, the best rum and tequila, and even sherry. Someone in that corner strummed the guitar that was almost impossible to hear beneath the shrill and hearty voices. As the noise and laughter swirled around them, Estela managed to choke down a glass of sherry. She was also served cool water, a commodity more precious than in the capital right now than liquor. I'm sorry, I have a really hoarse voice. Have some cool water, thank you.
It's one of the nicest days of the year.
Mm-hmm.
This is, thank you all for coming.
Yes, I'm only wearing 2 layers. Instead of 4. The voices seemed to grow louder as time passed, until Estela could not tell one from the other. She nodded and smiled dumbly when she thought she had been addressed, but really Estela could not understand a thing. All around her the women laughed and talked familiarly, calling one another Cara and Maha, dear and queen. In a farther corner, 2 of them embraced and kissed in rather intimate manner, oblivious, it seemed, to the crowd around them. Estela was beginning to understand what La Señorita meant by the phrase, women who answer to no men. After about an hour, as far as Estela could tell, the guitarist put down her instrument and clapped her hands sharply several times. The room stilled, and the claps were answered by claps from the doorway in the same manner, in the same staccato pattern. The guitarist continued to clap in rhythm as several women in embroidered huipiles over white skirts entered the room, stepping and stopping in unison. When they reached the center of the room, the four of them stood facing one another, two facing two in a square, and began a dance accompanied only by the percussive clapping of hands and the surprisingly forceful stomping of bare feet. Their faces were serious, their eyes shining. Soon others joined them from the tables in all manner of dress, until there were 2 lines of 8 facing each other, the sound and motion repeated over and over, yet too complex a pattern to remember the first time heard and watched, was intoxicating. At some point they stopped, and one of the women sang a mournful song in a language Estela did not recognize. The original 4 exited the way they had come, stepping and stomping, while the others returned to their seats. La Señorita had disappeared at some point during the dance, and Estela looked about the room to see where she might be. Then she heard that laugh again, the one La Señorita had uttered upon their arrival, and Estela saw her coming in the door, arm in arm with La Cata. La Cata was smiling and shaking her head. No, as several women entreated her, then seemed to relent with a shrug and a smile as a chair was pulled out for her at a table. La Doña Cata was said, by some, to be a sorceress, a diviner. Bottles and glasses were cleared away from the table, and she spread a deck of playing cards. As she turned them face up, one by one, the other women, now standing and gathered around, murmured and exclaimed. The 6th card La Cata turned up was the King of Diamonds. The 7th was the Jack of Hearts. As Estela craned her head to see, there was something about the Jack that looked different to her. She couldn't quite place her finger on it. Something about the length of the hair or the curl of the lip that made the figure look both masculine and feminine. La Cata surveyed the cards and took a long draw on her cigarette. Drought will end, she said, placing her hands flat on the table over the cards, when the fathers acknowledged their daughters. This was met by cheers and gritos, and La Cata swept up the cards into a compact bundle and left the room. But what does she mean? Murmured Estela. How can she know that? No one answered her. When La Señorita could see that Estela was about to wilt, she stood up and, along with several other women, took leave of the assembly. At the door, La Señorita brushed Doña Cata's lips with a cool kiss, and Estela felt a thrill in her stomach, as though she could not tell if she'd wanted to see that or not. They stepped out into the cool night air as a train light became visible in the distance. With the same agility with which they had disembarked, the women boarded the train north and took their seats in the otherwise empty car. In Mexico City, the familiar carriage was there to greet them, and Estela fell into it and did not remember getting into her bed before hearing a cock crow. All she noted was the thin mustache of cloud that passed before the face of the moon. Oh, you're welcome.
Maybe I have, well, did you want to talk any more about the book, or?
Let's see. Well, that whole notion of embodiment and symbolism, because I couldn't really tell if she picked up, so I should have asked her more. What do you mean? What do you mean? I think that when you're writing fiction, it's often tempting to have a figure to say, okay, this is the rich person, this is the rich half of society, this is the poor person. But ideally, you write characters to be people, right, more than anything else, not as figureheads. So it's more important what's their favorite breakfast, right? And from that, you build back to the notion that maybe this person can represent a group of people. I heard someone, and I think they were quoting some famous writing, recently talking about character building, and it's not from the outside, it's from the inside out that you build a character. And so that's something that we all struggle with.
Can you talk a little bit about the timing of this re-release? So this was released 25 years ago, and now we find ourselves in, well, not the same circumstances. Politically, we are in a moment that it just really, this book echoed for me.
Well, if all of the things that our current president wants to happen were put in play, we would be in this situation. We would be at the beginning of a revolution, because people would revolt just to be able to feed their children, right? And that's what's going on right now, is taking food away from families. So we'll just have to see. We'll have to hope not.
I just think the timing is extremely interesting. I mean, I know that it wasn't planned, but there were some moments in there that are heartbreaking, and you see it, I think, in what we're living through. We're starting to see. Should we open it up for questions?
Yes. Do you have any questions that we can answer? Yes, Diane.
Maybe just a comment, but I love how her son turned out. And I feel like I liked him as a character from the inside out, just because I related to a young man who was raised by a single mother. I've known lots of young men like that, and they have a lot more savvy about things, perhaps because of their being raised by a single mom. But also, I felt like he represented hope, and that was a wonderful way to end the book.
Yeah, and I think that's why he has that name. Speaking of characterization, he's named after Noah, and that whole notion of a promise, for tomorrow. When I finished that, and he's having his journalism career, I thought we could continue to write about Noah. But I ended the series there, the set of books. The first two books are based on family history, based very much on family history. But my grandmother, who Estela represents, was not at all like Estela. She was like the opposite of Estela. So, or my great-grandmother, that's who that would have been. She was very rigid and went to the Catholic Church. So, yes. So I'm glad you like them. Anyone else?
Can you tell us maybe a little bit about what you're working on next? What's coming out next?
Yes, I have a science fiction book coming out by the end of the year. He hasn't told me when yet, but he every once in a while asks me for the stuff that they're supposed to be asking for. Like quotes from people and all that. So I gave him a bunch of names and I haven't heard back. It's a science fiction book called Why Stars Burn. And I wrote it in little bits and pieces over many years, and then sent it to a small press in Baltimore called the Rosarium Publisher. And I met the proprietor some years ago because we were panelists on an Afro and Indigenous Futurisms conference where Octavia Butler's name was thrown around a lot, right? I just like the idea of publishing with a small independent press that made a big point of trying to reach a lot of different people. Some of his publications are in comic book form, some are novels like mine. I had also indirectly done some work for his press because he asked me for forward to a book he was reprinting called Ink, which is a really interesting book about the near future when certain people have to have the equivalent of a barcode on the inside of their wrist, and that's the only way you can get around, and it's very hard to duplicate or erase, and it says exactly what your place is in society. And it's a lot of the book takes place in Guatemala, and it's just very well done. So that's what I'm working on is Why Stars Burn.
Okay. And also, I don't know, probably people don't know this, but you have been experimenting, trying your hand with poetry.
Yes, I was going to tell you, I finally sent out a poem.
Great.
And it was accepted here for the Bainbridge,
wonderful.
What do they call it?
Poetry Corners?
It's an anthology. It's not the Poetry Corners. It's there's going to be an anthology out. You want to talk about that? Oh, you don't know about that? Okay.
I think it's
Barn
Barn.
anthology?
The Barn. And
The
anthology.
Barn, yeah. The Barn is putting out anthology, will be part of the Barn.
Okay. So I'm going to have a poem in it.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
exciting.
The judge should go on.
Yeah, I know. I just remember reading. It looked like it was legit.
Kathleen, your early books were, or the trilogy were based in Sonoran, Mexico, and it's the southern Arizona area.
One of them was The Flower in the Skull, the one directed before that. And it's based on my mother's mother was half of that Indian from the Sonoran Desert. And married my grandfather, who was from this crypto-Jewish family in Saltillo, Mexico. But he ran away from his family and became a Protestant minister and met my grandmother in Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that book is about, her background, which I
Did
researched.
you live in that area? Did you?
I've never lived in that area. I grew up in Southern California.
Mm. There's something about, and I said this at your last reading, there's something about the Sonoran Desert and that region of the country that just inspires really special literature that has a real knack for magical realism. And
Yes.
there's something about that area, and there's something about this area of the Pacific Northwest that fosters that. Do you feel that, and does that factor into your decision on where you locate a book?
Well, it might. I've always loved the desert, having grown up in it, and enjoyed traveling through the Sonoran Desert. I have cousins in Chihuahua, Mexico, and we would drive every year for 2.5 days across the desert. And I found out later there's a columnist for the LA Times, Adriano was his last name, I forget his first name. There's a whole group of sort of first and second generation Mexican Americans whose families do the same thing every summer. They drive back to see relatives in that part of Mexico. So we would get in our 54 Chevy station wagon. It was blue and white, and 3 girls and my parents, and drive and drive and drive and drive, and spend about a week and a half there, and then drive and drive and drive and drive back. But it was wonderful once we were there. Yeah, I love the desert.
If there are no other questions, folks, we'll conclude the evening, and thanks Kathleen and Erin for participating.
Yes, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.